There are legitimate ways to lose fat, specifically abdominal fat, without doing cardio. If you're someone that doesn't like cardio or even goes so far as saying they hate cardio, there are absolutely science-rooted ways to go about losing fat. Personally, I enjoy cardio, and I would never really tell someone to electively not do cardio, but I know that there are people that don't want to do it. So let's just be logical here and let's talk about some ways to do it. The first one, and by far the most powerful one, is going to be increasing your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This, no matter who you are, is going to be more powerful than exercise. Exercise is like a stimulus. I view exercise as almost like a catalyst for different responses and things to happen in your body. Very, very important. Clearly, I like exercise. Clearly, it has benefits. But the best way to lose fat is just to simply increase your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Look at people in Europe. Like, they haven't engineered exercise like out of their lives naturally. It's there still. They walk everywhere, so much activity. And you look at regions that live like that, and they're usually leaner, they're usually healthier, they don't have the instances of obesity, and by the way, they seem to live longer. So there's a lot of benefit there. But when we look at it sheerly from a fat loss perspective, we get so lost in this thought process of like exercise as this important component, which it is, but we forget about everything else. What about the rest of life? Most of our calories that we burn in a day, outside of course, our basal metabolic rate just to survive, is burned from non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Even in a lot of athletes, the exercise is a small sliver. And the more muscle that you have, the more non-exercise activity thermogenesis is gonna have an impact. If you have 10 pounds of muscle on you, moving that 10 pounds of muscle throughout the day is not that much calorie burn. If you have 50 pounds of muscle on you, that same exact activity is gonna burn exponentially more. So if you don't wanna do cardio, put on some muscle, but make sure you make a concerted effort to move more throughout the day. And that literally just means things like loading the dishwasher for your spouse or making the bed, like literally just moving, just being more active. Also, eating a little bit more protein and moving a little bit more throughout the day. Protein is very thermogenic. 20 to 25%, even more, 35% in some cases, of protein ends up getting burned just as extra fuel. It's thermogenic. And then it's extra calories, so you do want to move more. So you eat more, you move more, you create more overall energy moving through a system, which can allow you to burn more fat, specifically probably some abdominal fat. The next one is one that you've heard me talk about, but this is epically cool. Hot baths. Sit in a hot bath instead of doing cardio. I mean, come on, tell me that doesn't sound fun, right? That doesn't sound like way better than going out and slogging on a run. And I'm not saying that it's gonna replace exercise, but heat therapy, sauna, hot baths are what are called an exercise mimetic. Very real, legitimate science. In fact, there was a study that was published in Complementary Therapies in Medicine that took a look at, in this case, it was an infrared sauna, but it wasn't even that hot. And they found that sitting in a sauna ended up having very similar heat-induced exercise effects as going on a stationary bike for like 45 minutes. So there's 3 ways that an exercise mimetic, as far as like heat therapy, hot bath, sauna, you don't need to go buy a sauna. You don't. You can sit in a hot bath and it might even be better because you're so insulated in water, it's going to increase your temperature that much faster and your head's not heated, so you don't have the negative risk there. Okay, there's 3 ways that it does this. 1, it increases your heart rate and it increases blood pressure, just like it would with exercise. Number 2, it increases your respiratory rate. Okay, so this changes your respiratory exchange rate, it changes everything. You're breathing more, you're actually burning like it's activity. And then 3, there is a heat-induced effect. Just like when you go for a run, your body temperature heats up. So sitting in a sauna does all 3 of these things, but mainly increases heart rate, blood pressure, and increases, of course, the thermic effect. It is an exercise mimetic. Sit in a sauna, and it's like doing cardio. Not all the way, it's not gonna replace your cardio, but it is a dang close second. Number 3, this one's gonna sound crazy, but use allulose. Try adding allulose in. And I'm not just saying replace sugar with allulose. Allulose is a sweetener that technically comes from figs. It's considered a rare sugar, but now we're kind of using it as a sugar substitute. Very, very, very low calorie, but check out the literature on this, specifically with body fat. I find it fascinating. There was a study published in Nutrients, took a look at 121 humans, had them consume 5 grams of allulose or 10 grams of allulose, or the control in this case, which was sucralose or Splenda. Okay, all of them are technically 0 or very low calorie sweeteners. So everything is equal here. There was a significant reduction in body fat and total fat mass only in the allulose group. As a matter of fact, the higher allulose dose group had a significant reduction in adipose tissue in the abdominal region, belly fat. Okay, all without changing anything else other than adding allulose in. So mechanistically, we look at the potential literature there. This particular one, published in Molecular Nutrition and Food Research, found, okay, if they look mechanistically, there was an increase in CD36 when allulose was consumed. That's a fat transporter. So potentially more just mobilization and transportation of fat into a cell to ultimately be oxidized and burned, but also a decrease in what's called fatty acid synthase, which synthesizes fats from fatty acid into storage. So the combined increase in CD36 and decrease there could explain why there was such a change in fat, why fat was burned, even though calories were essentially equated for. So it's really fascinating. I've done other videos fully explaining this. But there was another study that looked at one single serving of allulose. Okay, one single bolus along with breakfast. They compared 5 grams of allulose, or the other group had 10 milligrams of aspartame. Okay? This is what's wild. So both of them 0 or low calorie sweeteners. They found fat oxidation, fat burning, went up. Carb oxidation, carb burning, went down. And free fatty acids increased. So fat mobilization increased, fat burning increased, all without really changing anything other than adding allulose in. Now, the researchers literally said within this study that it was, quote, enhanced energy metabolism. Energy changed. It increased energy expenditure from fat specifically. So this is one of those things where I'm not saying that this is going to be the only thing you need to do. But you're like, okay, hey, how do I increase this is similar to what cardio would do, right? Increasing energy expenditure specifically from fat. It's like cardio at a relatively low intensity, plus it tastes good. And one of the sponsors on my channel that I put a link for down below is RxSugar. They have these things that they call Swelthy snacks. If I had to be honest with you, it's like a Twix bar. It's a Twix bar that is sweetened with allulose and doesn't have the garbage in it. And it's literally, you're having a treat. It is one of the best tasting treats I've ever had, and it just so happens to be sweetened with allulose, because RxSugar is an allulose company. So they have their actual RxSugar sticks, like their sugar substitute packs that you can add to coffee, things like that. They have a brownie mix that they just released, but by and large, it's these Swelthy snacks that are awesome, because it's like a candy bar. So I'm not saying that you're gonna eat this candy bar and it's magically gonna erase calories. There's still calories in it. But you eat one of these things, and because of also the potential GLP-1 effect, so allulose in other studies has been demonstrated to have a pronounced effect on glucagon-like peptide 1. Like you've heard of Ozempic, GLP-1, et cetera, so it's so popular now. Well, allulose has a huge effect on increasing GLP-1, so it helps you with your appetite. So it has this huge effect on appetite, but then in addition to that, it possibly is skewing fat metabolism in a positive way. So I put a link down below. If you use code TD20, that gets you 20% off whatever you want from RxSugar. But again, I'm telling you, like this mint brownie, this chocolate, the caramel, the vanilla, all these, you're never going to look back after you try those. They are unbelievable. So that link down below for 20% off. The fourth one, this sounds wild too, but it's so real. Exercising in colder temperatures. Okay, there's some interesting data. There was even a study that took a look at something that's called 1,2,1,3-dihome. What the heck does that mean? Well, this is a compound, it is a lipokine that is secreted from our fat in response to cold exposure. So even just being in a little bit of cold exposure, like a colder room that's like 50, 55 degrees, can have a pronounced effect on fat loss. It really can. But there's some evidence that exercising in like 50, 55, 60 degree temperatures can actually increase the overall energy expenditure, by about 15%. So what I'm saying here is, okay, you don't like doing cardio, but maybe you need to do some cardio. Doing some cardio in a colder room or colder temperature actually has more of a fat loss effect. This one's a little bit less pronounced than maybe some of the other things I've been talking about, But again, I'm trying to give you realistic scientific levers. I could pull something completely out of nowhere and say it's going to be pronounced, but I'd rather just give you real stuff. So if it's wintertime, go for a run outside and you can possibly cut your time down by 15% because you're increasing energy expenditure 15%. But if you ask me, still just moving around more and increasing your non-exercise activity thermogenesis by doing the dishes and walking the dog and parking further away from the entrance to the grocery store, probably more powerful. Number 5 is going to be, instead of having defined cardio, I would recommend doing 2 short resistance training episodes throughout the day. I know not everyone has the luxury of doing that, but I'd rather see you do 2 20-minute resistance training blocks, because resistance training, as I mentioned before, it is a catalyst, it's a stimulus. So there's a lot of evidence to suggest that sort of micro-dosing workouts, you can actually get a little bit more out of it. So you have something in your favor by constantly sort of dabbling and touching on it. So people do double days where they'll do the resistance training and cardio in the afternoon. People are really trying to lose fat, right? They have their resistance training and then cardio later, or fasted cardio and resistance training later. If you really hate cardio, just divide your resistance training into 2 sessions. You don't need to do 2 separate larger sessions. Divide it into 2 sessions. Say, I'm going to do back in the morning, chest in the evening, 20 minutes each. I think you'll notice a big effect because you have this constant stimulation of the metabolism that way and a little bit more of an increase. This next one's going to get me in trouble because it's so simple, but so awesome when you look at the literature. There's something called water-induced thermogenesis. And we used to think that when you would drink water, that the body would have to heat it and that would take energy. And that is the case. But there was an interesting paper that demonstrated that when subjects drank 500 milliliters of water, a good amount, they had a 25% increase in resting energy expenditure. Basically, like their body was going on a low-grade walk or run just by drinking 500 milliliters of water for an hour. 25% increase in resting energy expenditure for an hour. That is kind of like doing a little bit of cardio. But what's interesting in this Journal of Clinical Endocrinology Metabolism paper is that they compared 500 milliliters of water to 500 milliliters of saline to 50 milliliters of water. 50 milliliters of water didn't do anything. So you got to drink a large bolus of it. Secondly, the saline, the salt water, didn't do as much. Well, that's weird. Well, you probably don't really care about this, but I'll explain it briefly. What's going on is when it's water without the salt, is you're possibly getting a stimulation of what's called an osmosensitive structure. So basically, because of the decline in osmolarity that would occur when you drink a decent amount of water, like 500 milliliters that doesn't have salt in it, it kind of alters the thermogenesis of that state. So because of just the change in osmolarity, body has to kind of work harder to correct that osmolarity. This is at least what's hypothesized. I can't say for certain, and I don't think the scientists can even say for certain. It's just what we're seeing. But across the board, even in all the literature that I've seen, drinking water does increase metabolic rate, at least a little bit. I haven't seen any that show less than like 6%, but I've seen them as high as this one at 25%. And it seems as though the amount matters. But I would not recommend going and guzzling more than 500 milliliters of water at one sitting. This next one is really aggressive, but it's highly effective. So please, please, please follow my disclaimer here when I say only do this if you know what you're doing. And please, I'm not suggesting everyone goes out and does this. And I have to put that disclaimer because it's more aggressive. 1 day a week, do a protein-sparing modified fast. Remember how I mentioned that protein is highly thermogenic? So you get a big effect out of consuming protein, but a protein-sparing modified fast is like my secret weapon. I've done videos on this for years, but really over the last year or so, have some of my videos on it really taken off. 1 day a week where you go high protein, very, very, very low fat, and 0 carb. Maybe not 0 carb because you could throw some basic veggies in there, but really it's 1 day where you go very low calorie but extremely high protein. I would recommend that you still try to get at least a half a gram of protein per pound of body weight on this day. So if you're 200 pounds, at least try to get 100 grams of protein, but that's so low calorie. For me, what I'll do is on a protein sparing modified fast day, I'm at 190 pounds, I'll do 200 grams of protein coming from like lean chicken breast, coming from whey protein, coming from super lean, 96% lean ground beef. So I'm as close to 0 fat as possible, and then maybe just some trace amounts from vegetables. It's 1 day, but I'm telling you, protein sparing modified fasting is not something that I made up. It's been used in medical weight loss scenarios for a long time. Very reputable people, Menno Henselmans, lots of people that are reputable within the industry talk about protein-sparing modified fast, but they do it for longer periods of time, which I will do if I'm really trying to get shredded for like summer or something. But if I'm just trying to like replace cardio here and there, so you know what, I can't do cardio, I'll at least do a protein-sparing modified fast and get somewhat of a major fat burning effect without a massive decline in my metabolic rate. Do not do it too frequently. It's too low calorie and it will eventually slow down your metabolic rate. The final thing that I recommend, and this is huge for people that don't like to do more structured, regular steady state cardio, is do an EMOM, every minute on the minute. Structure your own. I learned these really from the CrossFit community and from Jason Khalipa, but it doesn't have to be CrossFit. You don't have to be doing like burpee, bar jumps, stuff like that, box jumps. Like, no, just do something where you're accountable to a clock. So every minute on the minute, where literally every minute on the minute, you're doing a new set of reps, right? So let's say you do 12 reps of bench press at minute 1. As soon as the clock gets to minute 2, you're doing something else, right? So you're not having a 1-minute rest. You're having however long is left over between the time you finish your set and the next minute starts. So if it takes you 40 seconds to do your 12 reps of bench press, you have a 20-second rest before you start your next move. So create your own little circuit that way. Trust me, you'll be breathing like you're doing cardio, but you didn't feel like you did cardio. So you're getting your resistance training and your cardio together, and you're not having to be slaving away, being bored on a treadmill or something like that. So these are highly effective. And if you don't like cardio, they're probably the best ways to implement like more fat loss into your life. I highly recommend you do check out those Swelthy snacks, and a big thank you to RxSugar for the continued support on this channel so that we can do what we do as well. I'll see you tomorrow.